Hey, welcome back to Brain Power Unlocked. I'm Dr. Kevin Mays. Today, episode 4, the genius brain and high performance thinking. I love the notion of the genius brain because within every human is a genius. When you cut through the robot brain, what's that? That reactivity that will sabotage us. When emotion overtakes us, we're not able to be our best self. When we're stuck in the pattern of thinking the way we always did, we're limiting ourselves. But when you access the genius brain, that prefrontal cortex part of our brain, this is the thing that separates us from animals. When you learn to access that and to do it with intention and to know what brain is in charge and what brain you need in charge, you change the game for how you lead and how you lead your life. The genius brain is all about choice. Making choices, regardless of how it feels, regardless if it's comfortable, but making choices that align with what you know is important. So, in the 4-step conscious leadership process, we've talked about presence being the foundation, coming back to here and now, this moment, not letting your mind skitter to the past or to the future, and being aware that when your mind does that, you create these conditional emotions for yourself. And when you create that conditional emotion, the brain releases this blast of stress hormone that not only compounds the emotion that you're feeling, but then starts to alter your thinking, right? And in those moments when you're in the caveman brain, you can't think with logic. It's not available to you. Similarly, when you're in robot brain, you don't have that problem solving genius available to you. Only in genius brain. When you have genius brain available, when you've cultivated that sense of presence and then awareness and intention. Intention is all about genius brain because with intention, that is non reactivity and suspending those patterns. When you truly decide how you want to behave, how you want to think, how you want to behave, and the results you want, and you align that with the person that you want to become, the person you are becoming through those I am statements we talked about to reprogram your neural circuitry. When you change the game for yourself, for your organization, and you open the door to become the executive that the world needs. Become a leader in the true sense of the world, not a leader who's just defending their ego. There's a lot of leaders who do that who aren't leaders. Now they're tyrants, they're dictators, they're reactive, they're crybabies, they're whatever they are. True leaders, true leadership is aligned at a deep level with something that transcends our ideas and our thoughts, right? There's a deep alignment that when you settle into this place of wisdom within yourself, then you can lead with intention. Then you stop letting your feeling dictate how you think. You stop letting your feeling dictate how you behave, and you behave with purpose and with vision. So when you do that, recognize that we have these built-in biases. Recognize now when you behave and you think with true intention, with clean the slate, and you start to make choices about how you're going to think and how you're going to show up in a way that aligns with the impact you want to have and aligns with the result you want, aligns with the person you're becoming, you change the game. A lot of it, what's really important is to have clarity of what your vision is. I think for myself, before I had a vision statement, a purpose statement for the person I want to be as a leader in my relationship with my spouse, it was easy for me to justify when I was right and I would start to argue. It was easy for me to rationalize being pissed off about something she was doing. But once I got clarity around my vision of the person that I was becoming as a leader in that relationship, once I wrote down my leadership purpose, my vision of the person I was evolving to become and who I was becoming now, it became very clear that in those moments when I was making myself right, when I was frustrated, when I was irritated, when I was pissed off, I was off purpose. I was not aligned with the vision of the person I wanted to become. I wasn't my best self. I was reactive, and the caveman was sneaking in. You see, when you're in the genius mode, you have clarity of your vision. Now recognize As I said earlier, we have these internal hidden biases that this is really what ties into our STAR process. The first book I wrote was all about understanding that STAR process. Now, the STAR process suggests this, that we have, based on our neural wiring, we have certain ways, like being right handed or left handed, but certain ways we show up in the world cognitive. We're either strategic thinkers, we are abstract, and we interpret the world around us, or we're analysts. We see the world as it is, granular. Strategic thinkers don't see what is, they see what could be. Analytic thinkers don't see what could be, they see the details of what is. Tactical thinkers are the ones who take action very quickly with a detached, objective logic, where relational thinkers are the ones who take action based on what's going to have the best human impact for others. They will come off as less pragmatic, where tactical thinkers will perhaps callous and left when our own bias is in charge, like being right-handed or left-handed. If you're a tactical thinker and you're relational as your less preferred, you're going to make decisions that will be cutting to others. You're going to make decisions that you know are right. They're driven with urgency, but nobody gets on board. To be truly conscious as a leader, to be truly intentional, and to really unleash that genius brain is to understand those biases and preferences within your own thinking mindset. Are you strategic, tactical, analytic, or relational? Now, there's a whole framework and a model around this, so I don't want to get too deep into it, but recognize that the more you begin to understand your own bias, the greater you're in a position of choice. When you last sat down to eat a nice meal with your family, how long did you stop to think before you picked up your fork? Which hand should I pick my fork up with? Should I use my right hand or should I use my left hand? Last time you signed your name, how long did you stop and think, which hand should I use to sign my name? You didn't. That's how intuitive and reflexive these preferences are. And just because you're right-handed and use your right hand doesn't mean you don't have a left hand. In fact, I can tell you this, I'm right-handed. And so I will throw a ball with my right hand. But at one point I had elbow issues where I couldn't flex my elbow. So I had to learn, my son wanted to throw the football. I had to actually recreate my ability to throw with my left hand. It was very awkward. I had to stop and break it down and figure out how to do it. Over time, I got wicked good at throwing a spiral, but it never became my new preference, right? I got better at those parts of myself that had been atrophying because I hadn't been paying attention to. Now, what happened once my right elbow recovered, I went back to throwing the ball with the right hand, and my left arm gets unused. The same is true of our genius brain, right? We have these four core skill sets of an executive. We must be strategic thinkers who pioneer the vision out front, but we also must be tactical to understand what's getting done and to create accountability in the system, to have lower level immediate goals that people are held accountable to. However, I've seen too many leaders who fall into the trap of paying attention to their tactical when they should be in a strategic mindset. They're down in the weeds getting stuff done. Nobody's driving the ship. And the ship runs onto a shoal or sinks because they're not paying attention to where they're going. Instead, they're down in the weeds playing out the patterns of the robot brain. This is why it's so essential to interrupt the patterns of your robot brain so that you can understand that you need to be strategic and a visionary, but you also need to make sure there's accountability and things are happening as they should in alignment with your job, though, as a leader, probably is not to be getting stuff done the way it was before you were a leader, right? So you have to understand these four skill sets of the executive mind: strategic, tactical, analytic, right? You need to make data-driven decisions. However, if you're stuck in the analytical framework, because that's always worked for you, then you're probably not looking at the horizon as much as you should. You're not innovating the way you need to. You're not out front creating the changes and bringing your organization to the front of the pack. You're too far down in the weeds. You have to have awareness to understand where you need to be and when, what muscle you need to flex in your mind. You need to be strategic and look at the big picture. You need to be tactical and get stuff done. You need to be analytic down in the weeds to gain an understanding of the reality as it is. You need to be relational. Relational is the foundation of all of it, right? When you're a relational thinker and you're utilizing that, you're in that genius brain mindset, right? You're deciding to show up with empathy. You're deciding to create culture. You're deciding to create engagement. You're deciding to help others elevate. And that doesn't mean roses and sunshine, right? Because every rose has its thorns, as the old song goes. Thing is, sometimes to create engagement, you have to create accountability. You have to hold people accountable. Back to robot brain. I've seen too many people who are good at being pleasers who don't do that well because it doesn't feel. Your job as a leader is to be the star, to be the shining star in your organization, to be strategic, tactical, analytic, and relational. That means to operate from a position of your inner genius. Now, there's some tactics and techniques when you're in that relational sphere that are really essential in helping elevate others. And it's some basic stuff that you've learned in first grade. And it is one of the most profound set of leadership skills you can ever learn. Active listening, reflecting, matching and mirroring, right? When somebody comes to you with a problem, do you solve it? Do you fix it? Yeah, that's probably what got you here. Your expertise will undermine you every time because now you will train people that they need to come to you for the answers. And in effect, you're teaching them that come to you and they'll get a fish. You're not teaching them to fish. One of the most effective skill sets is to learn how to ask good questions, reflective questions. First and foremost, ask good questions. And secondly, just simply reflect back. What I hear you saying is, if I hear you right, you're saying in this way, when you can access your own presence in your own genius brain, you get the upper hand in this neural mirroring equation that plays itself out. Because remember, when you come into contact with another person, a dynamic happens, an alloy gets created. And because of this thing called neural mirroring, if we're not paying attention, if they're escalated and we're not paying attention, what happens? Oh, pretty soon we find ourselves escalating, getting irritated, frustrated, pissed off. And it's not about them and it's not about the situation. It's about our brain having these harmony neurons that pick up what's going on in the other person without us even consciously knowing it. And we begin to react as if it's going on within us. It begins to go on within us. They're irritated. We become irritated. But if you can come back to the present moment, just choose, become present, become aware, and then from that place of pausing, checking, and choosing, become present, become aware, and then intentional. You can ward off the reactivity and you can become the source that de-escalates others. That's genius brain at its best. De-escalating them by simply mirroring back, matching their posture. The neat thing is, in the way humans are hardwired, that we're social animals. And when we are out of alignment, you'll see that the posture between two people who are out of alignment, who are arguing, who are fighting, posture will be dissimilar. When you mirror their posture, it signals in the back of their mind in a way they're not even aware of that this is a safe place. Then when you begin to mirror back what they're saying, and you're not asking questions at this point, you're not asking leading questions, you're not trying to do anything except your back. What I hear you saying is, when you do these simple techniques, they begin to de-escalate. That's when you start to ask the open-ended solution-focused questions. That's the genius at its best, because that invites them to unleash their genius. When you're in the genius brain, your job is not to be a genius. Your job is to evoke the genius in them. And to understand that your job as a leader is to help others become better. When they become better, then you can ask yourself, do I need to be strategic? Do I need to be tactical, analytic, or relational? And where most leaders fail, they underserve their organization. They don't spend enough time being strategic. They don't spend enough time being relational. What's that mean? They need to communicate the vision. You need to communicate the vision. Help others understand why their job is important, why they matter, how they're making a difference, how what they're doing is, when they're doing the small things, to notice them. You know, one thing I think is fabulous, is fantastic to pay attention to, is that humans are hardwired with a relationship to authority. And what that means is we have parents. When we come into the world and we start to form our software, we form it relative to our perspectives of authority. Those get hardwired into us. They don't start out that way, but because we have these experiences and we learn how to meet the needs of authority to get our needs met, it gets woven into the neurocircuitry of our brain. Now, here we are decades and decades later playing out those same patterns. As a leader, you must be aware that you will become a blank screen upon which others will project their authority issues. The way they learn to relate to authority will come towards you. In this way, it creates this thing I call executive amplitude. As a leader, you will be under the microscope and you will have more influence. Everything you say and do will be scrutinized and will be overinterpreted. You can't communicate enough. Back to being relational. The more you can show up as a relational human being, the old school model of leadership was you don't let them know you. You stay distant and detached. That was back in the day of Henry Ford and the Industrial Revolution and Frederick Winslow Taylor, who was studying scientific management. And they discovered, if you remove yourself, then this machine that is the organization, and recognize this, that the central metaphor of the universe was the machine. And so we had this belief that a human organization is nothing more than a machine. And so therefore, our job is to pay attention to the machine. If one part's broken, you fix it. How do you fix it? Well, with a carrot or the stick, you beat it to submission or you give it a reward. And if it doesn't work, you get rid of it and put a new one in. Well, we recognize that over the years, wisdom of humans, guess what? Humans are machines. Sorry, Frederick. Humans are machines. Humans are humans. And that humans have this attention need. We have this authority need. They need to be recognized, validated, valued, communicated with, informed. It all goes back to your role as a leader and an authority figure. That's the relationship element that you must access when you access your executive genius brain. When you access your genius brain, recognize there's some choices that you need to make. And those choices will be uncomfortable because without exception, when you're right-handed or left-handed, you have one hand that you use when you sit down to eat without thinking about it. Without exception, when there's a problem on the table, you have one way that you're going to approach a problem. You're going to approach it strategically, tactically, analytically, or relationally first and foremost. And there's one of those four that you're going to overlook. Your job as a leader is to figure out which of those four you overlook and to do that with intention and purpose. Because if that is your blind spot, it will be the blind spot of the organization. And this is the great work I love doing, right? As a consultant and a coach, to help organizations uncover those blind spots, to help good leaders become inspired executives through our 360 process, right? We have a leadership academy that I've designed based on decades of running leadership academies. The latest leadership academy is beautiful. It's an incarnation of everything that I've learned from great leaders over the decades. And it involves a 360 assessment to help leaders have a great awareness of the impact that they leave. And that 360 assessment will give you feedback in a way that will absolutely transform your life. Because in our mind, we're going on, right? In our mind's eye, we're perfect. Everybody else is the problem. But when you have the audacity to sneak into the consciousness of all those around you and hear their perspective, that's the 360. And when you get that information, then you can behave and move as a leader with a deeper purpose and a deeper commitment. See, part of the work as a doctor of leadership, right, as a psychologist, is to help others understand what's under their own hood, first and foremost, to lead themselves first. When you lead yourself first, you put yourself in a situation that when you upgrade your leadership, then everything changes. Because in an organization, everything is a reflection of the mind of the leaders. Change your mind, you change everything. So not only is coaching and consulting fun, the team processes we have in place, team transformation processes that will absolutely radically alter how your executive team shows up in a way that will radically alter the performance of your organization. If your organization is not getting the result you want, we have to look upstream. That goes back to the executive team. So our Leadership Academy not only focuses on the executive team, but then the individuals around the table to help them take a deep dive, to understand, to peel back the layers, to understand underneath it all, where's the brilliance? Where's the executive? Where's the genius? And how do we create systems and processes that consistently evoke the genius around the executive table so that you can evoke the genius all the way through your organization? When you create a higher level of engagement, the research is pretty clear. 20 or 30% of individuals in your organization are actively engaged, believe it or not. And that's a national average. 50% are going along to get along, and the others are just under the surface, sabotaging the best efforts of your organization. If you could just change that formula, if you could increase that active engagement, you can radically alter the performance of your company. You can increase the profit, you can increase the revenue, you could make your organization the Goldman Sachs of your industry, right? The place where people line up to get in and they stay when they're there. That's what we do. That's what our processes help organizations do. And there's nothing more fun than the keynotes that I'm able to do, where I can work with a room full of leaders and business owners, executives, to help them understand and to leave that 1 hour session with tools that transform how they think about themselves as a leader and change their organization. Some of the most meaningful discussions I've had have been in rooms of 500, where individuals begin to really understand and look at themselves differently. Because true leadership isn't an external job. The most effective leaders know how to tune themselves up internally. They understand the robot, the genius, and the caveman, and they know how to access that genius and to access the genius in others, to create engagement and to create an organization that's exceptional. Now, there's one exercise that, as somebody who studied consciousness over the decades, through my own meditation practice, through research, to working with leaders, understanding that it's all about the reset, right? Because we will get snagged up into that caveman reactive state. We will find ourselves caught in the cycle of the same thinking and can't figure out why we can't get the result we want in our lives, in our leadership. The brain has a built-in reset button, and it's all about learning and mastering your ability to contain and control your attention, to bring your attention back to the moment. The thing I love is the breath. You see, your breath is an anchor to the present moment. Without exception, your breath is always in the present moment. It's never anywhere else. So when we talk about the breath, I'm not talking about your idea of the breath, I'm talking about the actual sensation. If you can just, for 2 minutes a day, bring your attention back to the sensation of your breath as it enters and leaves your nose, as it is, just to breathe in, breathe out, and just reset. The brilliant thing is your mind has this internal reset button in it. It has the ability to reset. It has the ability to chase off the caveman. You see, what's really going on when that stress hormone gets released into our blood is that it's a chemical reaction that normally will last as little as 90 seconds, actually, a minute and a half. And then that stress hormone starts to get cleansed out of the blood by the kidneys. The thing is, because we don't control our attention, our minds keep playing the same narrative again and again. And every time the mind plays that narrative about how we were wrong, about how they didn't understand us, about how they don't get it, about how I can't believe blah, blah, blah. Every time our mind goes back to that narrative, we release another cortisone blast, another stress hormone blast into our blood, and we heighten that emotion. But that emotion has a shelf life. And that's the reset button that's available when you just return your attention to the sensation of your breath. It's a very subtle thing, but if you can notice in your nose, the breath coming in, the breath going out, not changing it in any way, just noticing it as it is in that moment. You come back to the world as it is in this moment, and you start to create and strengthen that mental muscle of presence. That's the goal. That's the doorway to access the genius brain within, right? To be able to come back to that point of presence. Before you can lead others, you have to lead yourself first. And that means becoming a master of your own consciousness. That means being able to understand where your attention is placed at any given time. That means noticing the emotion that's arising and passing. It means having a deep level of self-awareness. And the brilliant thing is, you were born fully aware. You have it. You learned along the way to be unaware. And this process. The process I teach is about knocking down those walls to become a fully integrated leader, to really access your power. When you do that, it's a game changer. You can live life on your terms. You can become the shining star in your organization. You can become one who is strategic, tactical, analytic, and relational. If you'd like to bring more information about how you and your group can elevate your conference to create a whole room of star performers, we've got a keynote for you. Reach out, check it out. We have some online, some samples of some of the work I've done, and I'll create a keynote that will help you look like a rock star. If you're a coordinator, if you're somebody who's putting together if you're coordinating or facilitating a conference in your industry and you want to feel like a rock star, I'm here for you. My work is to help you look, to create a keynote that brings out the best in your participants, that leave them raving about the conference you put together. That's the work I do. I'd love to work with you. I'd love to see what we might do to help create a deeper level of conscious awareness and intention, and to help your association become a group of star leaders who are conscious, intentional, and lead on purpose. So for now, access that genius, come back to the present moment, and learn to be the best version of yourself.